Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagano, and welcome back to another action-packed, fun-filled episode of Iowa's favorite conservative podcast. I am back here at Studio 130 today, again, with everyone's favorite, John Hendrickson. John, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Good. I was a little bit fearful when I saw a headline this week, John.
Oh, okay.
It said that the director of the Department of Education was leaving after just a very short stint, and I was afraid that you were going to stolen away from us to lead the Department of Education.
Yeah.
'Cause I think that would be your highest and best calling, would be to lead a government bureaucracy.
Yes, yeah.
No, anyway, so thankfully, no, John was not tapped to be the new director of the Department of Education. I think you do well, John. I think you could reform a bureaucracy, make it much more accountable to the people and to okay. I don't know the whole backstory on that, other than a very short run for the current, or the director that's in place now, and the new one, the deputies being promoted. And I'm not familiar with either one of them, but immediately the only response I think I saw from liberals and left-wing media was that what is the nature of her relationship with Betsy DeVos? That's the only thing that matters. Not any qualifications, but is there any tie at all to Betsy DeVos? And let's just go with that.
I think there is. I think she was the policy director for DeVos when she was Secretary of Education.
So we'll cruise right past any qualifications and go to that. Well, I'd say, look, that's a plus in my book, but anyway. Okay. Well, when we were together earlier this week, John, we briefly touched on the Hunter Biden indictment, but mostly talked about submersibles and Titanic adventures.
Yes.
But we have since learned that the Ocean's Gate submersible was lost right away. And while the world was watching and waiting to find out what happened with those folks, we learned a whole lot more about the Hunter Biden indictment. Yes. So I think that's really the interesting story here. Now, usually whenever there's any sort of scandal with liberals, conservatives are chastised for making too big of a deal out of it. But there's something to this one, John.
Yes.
And I know you followed it as well, but I saw just, I think yesterday that this idea of just how many payments Hunter was receiving from this Chinese espionage energy front, and where were those payments going and in exchange for what? And it seems pretty clear that they were made in exchange for access to, at that time, former Vice President Biden.
Yeah, the big guy.
The big guy.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm reading this from, I actually really, John Schindler was the author of the article that I was reading, and I really enjoy his work. He's a former NSA espionage guy, Army War College, the whole bit, who's very critical of President Trump, and even on things that I think he's since maybe exonerated on, but certainly not a right winger as we think of him today. But he hinted that if these allegations are true, this would be the biggest scandal in the history of American presidential politics. That's a big statement, considering where we've been, but directly selling access to foreign espionage outfits, you can strip away the politics and all of that and call conservatives just a bunch of reactionaries, but that is a big deal.
It is, yeah.
And here's the thing, I guess here's where I really come down on this that troubles me, is this idea that we should not get answers on it, that there shouldn't be scrutiny.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right, and that's one of the frustrating parts, some of the aftermath of Hunter Biden, in a sense, getting a pass, just a little slap on the wrist. But, I think you bring up a very good point that I think those on the left are assuming that Hunter Biden's, has this agreement reached, that's what, a misdemeanor for tax.
Right.
But they think, well, let's just move on. But I'm hoping that as the committees in the House keep investigating, they're revealing some very alarming things that need further investigation. And what kind of access did Hunter Biden provide, and how did President Biden and his brother fit into that? And I mean, these are. I mean, I think it's a bigger scandal than even the documents that Trump had at his resort, and so it's. I mean, it's serious, and there was the other thing is Hunter Biden was selling his paintings, and basically it almost seems like money laundering there even.
I mean, it almost seems.
Yeah. Yeah. I was trying to.
You're not in the market for an original Hunter Biden.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have $75,000, and that's just for the copy, not the original.
Oh, he's selling prints for $75,000. That's fantastic. Wow. You talk about the investigation and the indictment and the plea and what seemed to be a very easily, cleanly packaged deal for Hunter Biden here. So this IRS whistleblower on this case that existed before, but now this is from Politico. And this IRS whistleblower asserts that the Department of Justice and the U.S. Attorney in Delaware, who actually did all this with Biden, went out of their way to hamper an IRS investigation of Hunter Biden's taxes by consistently slow walking the case, preventing enforcement actions, and tipping off actions related to the investigation.
Can you imagine what if the reverse, and it was dealing with President Trump or one of his sons?
I can't imagine what it is, because we've got a very real world example of it right now. The left is like, well, it's just crazy Republicans talking about Hunter Biden's laptop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, actually, that is what we're talking about right now. And I just want the answers. If President Trump had documents that he intentionally withheld that had bona fide national security implications that were I want to know that. I really do. Now, I have real questions about the how and the why and all of that, but I do want to know. I have an intellectual curiosity, and if there was a bona fide crime, and this isn't just selective, justice here. I want answers on this.
Yeah.
I want to know why Hunter Biden was being paid these sums of money by the Chinese Communist Party. And let's not pretend, it's through some energy group.
Yeah.
I mean, go in and read this. It was CEFC, China Energy, which was a direct front for the Chinese Communist Party's espionage efforts, kicked out of other Western nations, paying Hunter Biden millions and millions of dollars with credible evidence that in exchange for those payments was access to the former vice president. I mean, there is almost nothing else bigger that we could be doing with a Republican majority in Congress right now than getting every answer on that. And it shouldn't be Democrats trying to chastise Republicans for trying to get answers. It should be, we're getting to the truth.
Yes. Yeah, that's absolutely right.
And if true, this is an immediate disqualifier for continuing to hold the office.
Yes. Yeah.
And Hunter should be in hot water for far more than failing to report this to the IRS.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're good.
No, I think you're absolutely right.
Okay. I just want to follow up, because we really, the follow up on the Titanic story was, they imploded and they're gone. Everybody knows that. And James Cameron had some things to say. I just saw this, so it was interesting. He has spent more time. He's been down there 33 times.
Wow.
More time on the Titanic than the captain was. Because the captain set sail and went. James Cameron has spent more time on the Titanic than the captain. So that's all I got to say on that. All right. Well, good. Wow. We got fired up quick.
Yeah.
So cycling to something equally exciting, John, is state budgets.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to make it interesting, though. I think we take for granted, and we've talked about this many times, we take for granted how strong Iowa's budget is. We're used to seeing how terrible it's managed at the national level.
Yes, yeah.
Here in Iowa, not only is our budget balanced, but we're actually running a surplus year over year.
Mm-hmm.
And look, it's because our economy's strong, our receipts are good, but our legislature and our governor have held the line on spending.
That's right, yeah.
But some of these, that's not universally the case around the country.
No, it's not.
So
no.
I'm going to let you talk about,
So we often think that bad budgeting is just in Congress, but it's actually in many state capitals as well. And there's been an ongoing debate between what some have called the blue state model and the red state model, of how states are fiscally managed. And so the Wall Street Journal had a good editorial this week, and basically highlighting that several progressive blue states, namely New York, New Jersey, California, have in the last for decades, but in the last several years have really turned on the spending spigots and in a sense have also increased taxes. And so the results are coming in of what this has done. And so right now, New York, New Jersey, and California, they're all seeing a decline in tax revenue. And along with that, a lot of them, if not all those states, are facing budget deficits or shortfalls as a result. And so, and what we hear constantly from those states is you just have to keep spending more on all these programs and also taxing more. And what's happening is you have a mass exodus of people leaving those states because of the high taxation and poor fiscal policies. And now the Journal countered that and said, well, look at Florida as an example, because Florida's budget is smaller than New York's, and they have 2.5 million more people than New York, and Florida's revenues are going well. And, of course, we all know Florida is a no income tax state, but after reading that editorial, and so the Journal's basically arguing that states that are fiscally conservative are doing a lot better than these blue progressive states that are trying to tax and spend themselves into prosperity. But what I was thinking of, instead of Florida as an example, I think what's going on in Iowa is actually a better model to look at. And if we want to look at the red state model, and the reason I say Iowa's better is not just because we're here in Iowa, but really what the legislature and Governor Reynolds have done is really historic. Because you look at, for example, just on the tax front, they started out by, and you were a big part of that in 2018, at what was then the biggest tax cut in our history that started to reduce our taxes. And then we had last year's bill, which was the historic flat tax. But, going from a 9-bracket progressive income tax to a low flat tax is quite an achievement. But the only reason they're able to do that is because, as you mentioned, the governor and the legislature have held a line on spending. And so basically, for example, the legislature passed a budget this year, $8.5 billion, but they only spent 88% of revenue. Right. They could have spent up to 99, but they're controlling their spending. And so, and the other thing is that people will say, well, education isn't fully funded, but all these programs are not being cut. They're gradually increasing, and so, as I always like to say, that it's only in government where, if you slow the growth of spending, some consider that a cut.
Right.
But look at the results. Iowa, Florida, the states that are following these conservative budgeting principles. I mean, we're seeing surpluses. We saw surpluses before COVID. We saw surpluses after COVID. Our revenues, even with the tax cuts being implemented, are still strong. Our corporate revenue, just like, Wall Street Journal in their editorial said, well, look at Florida's corporate tax revenue is up, so is Iowa's.
Yeah.
And our surplus for fiscal year 24 is expected to be about $2 billion. The money in the taxpayer relief fund, which you and I have talked about before, is massive. I mean, we're at $1.7 billion now. It's going to be over $3 billion by 2024. So, Iowa's really doing a good job. Yeah. And even with this economic uncertainty with inflation and all that, our financial situation is very good. The state's on a good, solid foundation.
Yes. That number that you touched on in there is what percent. I want to spend a little bit of time on this. What percentage of revenue is being spent in the budget? I think you said 88% last year.
Yeah.
Now, Iowa has a 99% expenditure law, which they can deviate from, but that's of available revenue. So you can spend 99% of however much you collect in taxes that year, plus however much maybe was left over from the year before.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really mean a lot, especially in these times when revenues are strong. But if you spend 99% of whatever you pull in revenue, but then your revenues go down, go into a recession or for whatever reason, now you're cutting the budget or deappropriating. And that's just not good budget practices, right?
No.
So what we've got and at one point the goal was maybe get to 98 or 97, or I think maybe one of my last year or two was get to 95. And that was like, wow, we are really, and now it is. And look, it's based on the strength of revenue collections and continued discipline of the budget, but down to below 90. And what that does is there's multiple benefits to that. I mean, one is the budget is sustainable. It's not going to be bumpy and rocky and we'll extend this and pull it back. And you go all the way back to some of the things that happened, back during the Culver administration where you max the budget out, the bottom falls out of it. And now you're pulling the rug out from underneath schools. And it's just a whole host of bad problems so it's an honest, sustainable budget that when you say we are going to fund this program, you can take it to the bank. We're going to be able to live up to that obligation. That is very, look, but what we care about here is it sets the stage for benefiting taxpayers. Is when we hold the line on spending, ultimately the taxpayers benefit. Yeah. So it is a decade or more of fiscal discipline that led to 3 major income tax bills. And it would seem more to come because these tax bills have all been built on the idea that the state continues to collect more in revenue than it needs to operate.
Yes.
Not that we're going to starve the beast, as I keep coming back to. We're not cutting taxes and then trying to figure it out later. That was the model of some other states that get talked about when we, but we're cutting taxes into the white meat.
Yes.
Or however you want to phrase that. We're collecting too much. Let's stop collecting it. So I was at a round table. I'm getting a little off topic here, John, for the Iowa Taxpayers Association, but House Ways and Means Chairman Dan Dawson was there. And again, was talking about these same things we're talking about, where the history of these tax bills and his continued interest in charting a path to eliminating Iowa's income tax. And it's all of that. The foundation for all of those things is the discipline inside the state budget. That's right. And it doesn't end now that we've gotten to this great place where we have been disciplined. It is an ongoing effort. And it's you have to zealously guard that every year because there will always the universal truth in governance is the insatiable appetite to spend more dollars. Yeah. And those almost are always seemingly worthwhile projects. Oh, if we could just spend another $10 million on this thing, we'd get a great outcome and it'd be great for everyone. And 20 million here, or maybe it's a small little thing, but it gets started and it happens at every level of government.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a great point because it's often assumed that, if we just spend more money on, education is a perfect example. Right. We always hear, year after year, education isn't fully funded, but when you ask people, what is that fully funded mark, they can never tell you. Right. Because there's never enough money for that. And what we're seeing in a lot of states, especially that are following this, if you want to call it red state model, they are providing better services at lower costs and versus these states like New York and California that are on the verge of bankruptcy that are continuing to increase spending and taxes and they're providing very poor services.
Right. And we have talked about, I know you and I agree, John, with this idea of states being the laboratories of democracy. states will follow a path, implement ideas, and if they work, other states will replicate that.
Yes. Yeah.
So now we're really going to see, because this movement of red state fiscal management versus blue state is really the difference between those two has seemingly accelerated over the past few years.
It has, yeah.
Where you have Iowa, Florida, a few others that have really, North Carolina, that have really gone down this path of tax cuts, strong fiscal stewardship, and it seems to be working. And then the blue states, which are now facing the deficits, they're growing the budget, they're raising taxes, all these things. Well, where do we go from here? I mean, play this out another few years. And we're already seeing it through migration data and the census and all that. But the evidence of what works and what doesn't is going to be irrefutable. Mm-hmm. If the red state model works, which we believe it does, and we believe there's evidence that it does, it's only going to be proven right more and more.
Yes.
And so I guess what I'm saying is I'll be very, very interested to continue to watch what happens in these blue states. We see Illinois seems to be becoming almost a failed state, mm-hmm. and others that there's only so far you can continue to extract money from your citizens to pay for your budget malfeasance before people have just had enough and they leave.
Yeah.
And I think that's starting to happen, but I think it's only started.
Yes. Yeah. It's, and we're seeing it in our neighbors to the north in Minnesota.
Right.
I mean, they're losing population and they just, their session, as we talked about in another podcast, they just blew through a $18 billion budget surplus in new spending and tax increases, and they're probably going to see some of the similar problems that these other states are. Well,
and if there's one thing that has shown the people of Minnesota the way, it's John Hendrickson.
Yes.
So the trailblazer who started a movement,
a political exile.
That's right. Well, very good. All right. I love it. I love where we're at as a state and continuing to showcase how this stuff works. So we'll link to the article in the description on the podcast. So I think that'll be great. And we'll continue to keep an eye on it.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, John.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, we are going to have a special announcement coming up. And
I'm really excited.
Yeah. So I might even be a little early to go, but we got something really exciting coming out in podcast world. And joining us on our next episode is I'm going to have a gift for John.
Wow.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So you won't want to miss it. So, all right. Anyway, that's all we got for today. And with that, we will see you next time on ITR Live.